In this video, we're going to discuss the health and wellness of pro esports athletes, why it's so important to have this focus, but what we'll be really focusing in on more in depth is just, especially something like the schedule in which they play some of their matches and how condensed it can be and really not beneficial for the players themselves. Welcome everyone to the Esports Hector YouTube channel. Make sure you grab some water or your favorite beverage, a notepad, and a pencil or paper to make sure that you are doing everything you can to level up your gameplay. The video that I will be referencing is actually very recent. It was the Nadeshot and Courage show on YouTube. I will put the link down below in the video description. I'm gonna also just tag it right on the right side of the screen so that way you can take a look at the episode. I thought it was really good for what it was and it provided a lot of context. What I'm gonna be focusing in on are different segments that are brought up during that video, in which case I can then provide maybe a little bit more feedback as to things that I see, maybe things that I agree with or disagree with. So let's check it out. In this first little segment, Nadeshot talks about a theater system.
Hey, like Call of Duty, we spent a decade where, yeah, maybe a couple games out of that decade, we had a theater system.
What I would say here is I've been talking about this probably for the last 3 to 4 years when I've been trying to get myself into the space, where I actually 100% agree with this. I believe that there should be a theater system that is created. The reason being is we want to make sure that the player can actually watch things from a holistic approach, but also so when it comes to coaching, I don't have to go in and watch 5 different streams or 4 different streams going on all at once. I can just take a bird's eye view, very similar to the way Rainbow Six Siege is set up. Want to make sure that I can see things from a bird's eye view, but then if I want to go into the player view, I definitely can do that. Now, in this next segment, we have what I would say Nadeshot's conviction in esports. I personally, while there are other people that believe esports is dying, I truly believe that that's not the case. I think we're going to see a shift in the way the industry is designed. And I think with having health and wellness practitioners in the space, it's going to just help fortify some of these structures that will make for better players long term.
I still have an undeniable and unrelenting conviction around esports long term, but we were talking about this on stream the other day. I really do think that there needs to be some universal common ground between games that we play, because there's so many options that the barrier of entry from a new player or a new spectator's perspective, every game is just so wildly different from each other. There's no connective tissue.
With that little segment right there, again, there's something that I truly agree with. I am at times watching 3 different matches going on all at once. And that can be a lot, especially where, for example, I personally, with traditional sports, watch 1 game at a time because I'm really trying to invest a lot of my time in that game. But I'm also not going to be watching a basketball game, a baseball game, a hockey game all at the same time because there's just too much going on. It's like going to your favorite sports bar and they just have so many TVs on and just so much content that you're inundated with all this information and you're really not paying attention to what's going on. If there's going to be one takeaway from this video, I would say it's going to be this next segment where we talk about consolidating league schedules. Personally, I feel 50-50 to some extent within this topic. I understand the point that they're bringing up in this segment, and I agree with the segment, but I think we need to take a look further into things so that way we can truly understand how we can solve for this problem.
All the publishers, all the leagues, they need to get on the same schedule. There needs to be consolidated yearly cadence and programming that we're at.
What he's pretty much saying is just consolidating the league schedule, similar to the way the NFL is set up, as an example, where I know that from the months of September all the way to February, I can almost expect a weekly football game that I can sit down and watch. A lot of these esports titles or leagues are year-round, from more or less, as an example, Siege is gonna start with SI in February, give or take, and then they go right into stage 1 pretty quickly. I would say within about 4 to 6 weeks of after SI is over. And then there's just these big lulls in time. And I would prefer that we can consolidate, knowing that SI for me should be the Super Bowl. So I want that to be more towards the end of the calendar year for that title. Another thing that I think is really important, and I'm gonna use Siege as my example, is one thing that I didn't like about this, calendar year of Siege matches is that they had 4 days of playing, and a lot of that time was spent in double headers. Now, these double headers aren't back-to-back games. It could be playing the first game of the day and then playing, 6 hours later. That means that you are warming up prior to that first game, and then whether you win or lose, the outcome is still the same. You have to be scheduled. Now you gotta sit down, watch some VOD review, then you gotta go back into playing the game and warming back up again to then play again. So you can easily spend a 10, maybe even a 12-hour day, depending on the time zone and all those constraints. That's not really beneficial to a player's mental, especially if they're losing that first game. Their mental is just completely out the door. And now we have to, rework them to get them to a point that they are mentally prepared for the next game. This goes a little bit more into what I was just mentioning in that last segment of understanding calendars and consolidating that schedule. So that way, again, you're getting your viewers to know that the season is only 3 to 4 months long, and therefore you can move on to watching another league after. Because in traditional sports, while there is some overlapping, it's not that major. Like right now, Call of Duty is going to be on events, essentially right now. We're also gonna see some Apex going on with some events. We're going to see, we just saw League finishing up with their season, and we're gonna see Siege within the next couple months because of SI. But as an example of this, in January, we have Apex starting up, we have Rocket League starting up, we have the Call of Duty Major 1 happening at the end of the month. We're gonna be going into SI within that 2 to 3 week period after that Call of Duty Major 1. So there's 4 leagues already trying to fight for your attention. And that can be really difficult, especially when maybe one of your teams is playing in one game at a certain time, but in another game at that exact same time. So how do you manage that? I think this is where Nadeshot and Courage were talking a little bit more about the idea of creating that structure.
Every single year you look forward to football, September through January, and the Super Bowl at the end of January, beginning of February, whatever.
No, more structure would be great.
Brother, there's just...
I can't even keep up.
This is coming from 2 high-level esports personalities where they're even saying they can't keep up to what's going on. Therefore, how is the casual person supposed to keep up? I'm a big fan of not multitasking, because at the end of the day, if you're multitasking, you're actually really not paying attention to anything that's going on at any time. If we can, I would love to see better structure being placed into these titles. And therefore, then gives the personalities in these titles the opportunity to be streaming during their off season to gain more attention. As an example, I can watch or go on Twitch and watch Tyreek Hill doing some, he was recently doing some therapy work with his therapist to get him ready for that week's games or that week's game. Why can't we do that with esports, where they can stream during their off season to essentially build their brand? At the end of the day, that's what they are. They're a brand. They could be, again, Courage and Nadeshot, the player, but that player has to create a brand so that way you can garner more of an audience or a wider audience. In this last segment, they bring up the idea of bringing back MLG. It's really funny, and I'm going to just talk a little backstory. When I train with some of my clients, I have this one particular client who works in investing, and he actually brings up gaming to me every now and again just to understand the landscape. But with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, we were talking about this idea of MLG coming back, and he didn't know what it was, so I had to elaborate to him the story behind MLG. Personally, I would love to see something like this happen, where we can bring back MLG or create something that is similar to the way MLG was structured. I definitely don't want to see what Nadeshot brings up of having one weekend and have multi-titles all playing at the same time. That's a lot. Again, kind of bringing back to, we want to make sure we're consolidating these schedules and not inundating an audience with so much information and so much stimulus. So let's check out what he has to say here.
This is why we need MLG back, dude.
Man, I would love that. So
just have Major League Gaming be the U.S. Esports Federation. You get the 5 most popular games in the year-round circuit, city to city. It all happens one weekend every month. It'd be amazing. It'd be electric. MLG was too early.
It was.
Before their time.
And I would agree with that. For context, I've been gaming for almost 30 years. And I remember when MLG was a thing. Now, I would agree that they were ahead of their time, but there's definitely a way that we can bring that back. And I would agree with MLG being this road show, if you want to call it as such, where, let's say, Call of Duty comes in, Overwatch comes in, Rocket League, Siege, and a 5th title. Insert your favorite 5th title that you want to see. Where, Siege, we know where to have these events, but it's not going to be the same location as Call of Duty or Overwatch or Rocket League. Just so that way you're creating a product that the masses can attend. One thing that I personally don't like is, with Siege as an example, is waiting to the last second to know when either A, the season starts, or B, where the major is being held. To be completely honest, a lot of these venues are already paid off and rented well in advance. So why can't we just go in and essentially tell the audience, Major 1 is at this location, Major 2 is at this location, and SI is at this location. That way people can plan accordingly, because I'm not gonna go and spend, let's say, $2,000 to go down to Brazil when that was given to us starting right now. Esports is a hobby and a very expensive one, or gaming is a hobby and a very expensive one, but you're not getting the audience that's going to be watching the Twitch stream version of it all the time to attend all these events. So let's really share that information ahead of time so people who are excited to maybe go catch a event either in a different city or a different country can do that. The other thing that I would possibly even like about something like this is make it very much like FIFA. where Europe has their own league, they don't come to NA unless they qualify more or less for an event. And I know this sounds really stupid, but let me get this thought really thought through and elaborated to you. Think of it similar to the way the UEFA or the European football is set up, where the top teams in Europe then end up playing in some sort of championship. With that champion, they then go to a different location and play against champions from each of the regions, as opposed to let's bring in six teams from a region for an event prior to LAN. You get eliminated, and there was a lot of money that was spent doing that. Why do we need to be spending money and blowing that money for some of these orgs that it can actually wipe out the org altogether? We want to make sure that we're keeping sustainability within the industry. So let's build out something a little bit smarter, maybe a better grassroots system that will then bring a younger audience up through the ranks to then be able to build better stories to get you excited to watch these players. I know for me, as an example, I've worked with, in traditional sports, collegiate athletes that end up going pro. And for me, there's something about building that story that excites me to then want to watch them at the pro level. And there we have it, folks. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this content. It was a little bit different compared to what I've done in the past, and I did that on purpose just to spice things up a little bit, give my hot takes to certain ideas and whether or not I agree with them, or go a little further into some context. I want to make sure that players are as healthy as possible. Let's use traditional sports as our example. When I've worked in that setting, my off-season was to help them build that body of armor. That way, when they get into their season, they are structurally as sound as possible. I'm not saying that injuries can't happen, but we want to make sure that we can lessen that risk of injuries happening during their season. Why can't we do that with esports? I think there's a great way to do that, and by essentially building that structure in place, not only are we building stronger bodies, but stronger minds, more resilient minds, people that can withstand the mental but physical essential demands that are being placed on the body. This is something that I truly believe in. Comment down below if you agree with it or you disagree, and tell me why. I definitely want to see what everyone's thought process is with this. Lastly, if you can smash the like button, subscribe, and enable notifications, I would appreciate that, as that just brings it out to a wider audience, and I want to make sure that I'm helping people in any way possible. And with that, everyone, I want to thank you once again, and as always, stay healthy and game on.